Most founders lose the investor's attention during a pitch meeting in the first 60 seconds. Why? Because they create confusion instead of curiosity. Now, I'm going to share with you a private coaching session where I explain exactly how to fix that. We're going to cover the battle between clarity and confusion and how to get investors to actually pay attention and maybe even invest. Now, ignore the janky Zoom setup and focus on the tactics because this is the exact playbook that founders use to get funding.
So I have a few different little chapters here I want to talk about. The first is about the 30-second pitch, which is really the linchpin of any time you're speaking to an investor or really anybody. If you're doing sales or if you're trying to convince an A-plus employee to take a risk and come to work for your startup instead of Google. And people say I'm kind of obsessed with 30 seconds. Why 30 seconds? Why not a minute or 3 minutes? Well, if you think about it, it really is a simulation of the way conversations work in real life. You meet someone at a cocktail party, not even in a formal pitch. But what do you need to do? You need to, hold on, I'm just making sure. Yep. What do? You need to make sure that they hear you, they get what you do, and they're interested. But you don't give a 30-second pitch. Someone walks up to you at a cocktail party and says, hey, what do? You give them one sentence that's crystal clear, right? If the lights went out after that, they get what you do, right? And the only goal of any part of this pitch is for them just to say, tell me more, tell me more. And then if they're interested to tell me more, you have 2 or 3 more sentences that are super clear that gets them really interested. And if they're interested, then they say, tell me more, and maybe they'll have questions, and that's a Q&A. And whether it's in that cocktail party format or in a formal pitch or in a demo day, the principles are exactly the same. Nobody is going to write a check based on a 30-second pitch or even a 5-minute interaction or even a 30-minute interaction. You got to keep them wanting more, intrigued all the way. And then hopefully after a honestly pretty detailed process, maybe you get a check. So that's why I'm so obsessed with the 30-second pitch. And excuse me, the content is all there. I actually have free on my website a 29-second pitch playbook, which is kind of a Mad Libs fill in the blank that you can do. That'll make it really simple. And the reason it's called 29 seconds is that the best 30-second pitch is 29 seconds because nobody ever heard a pitch and said, gee, that was nice, but I wish it was longer. No, if it's longer, they'll ask some questions if they want to know more, and that's exactly what you want. So the pitch is, I don't want to say formulaic, but the information you put in there is pretty formulaic. But the key to that is you got to know what to leave out. Because founders have a bias. You've dedicated your life to this. You want to say everything, right? It's amazing what you've done, but you can't say everything. So you've got to strategically deploy information that gets the point across, but leaves them wanting more. And what that means is that the 30-second pitch is just the table stakes. The real meat of the conversation comes during what I'll call the Q&A, but should really be a conversation because investors are people. They don't want to be lectured at. They want to have a conversation, right? So the thing to remember when you get to a Q&A portion is that every question is a gift to you, right? A lot of people get really nervous. Oh no, I'm going to get grilled. No, because when an investor asks you a question, you're not a mind reader. They are telling you what they're thinking. They're telling you what they're excited about, what they're curious about, what they're skeptical of, where they call BS on you, right? So it is, you should welcome those questions and keep your answers brief because you have a limited amount of time. And the longer you spend with your answers, the fewer questions they get. And if every question is a gift, we all love getting gifts. So you want as many of them as possible, right? So you want to answer the question and follow their curiosity, right? You want to say what they need to hear, not what you want to tell them, right? That will all come. So that's the Q&A. And then this is really important. When you hear a question, you want to put it in a bucket. There's 2 different types of buckets. Number one, you should be aware that there's going to be certain types of questions you're always going to get asked. You're going to get asked about, even if you mentioned it in your 30-second pitch, you're going to be asked about competition. You're going to be asked about market size, all those deck pages, and you should just have those answers rehearsed and ready to go. But here's the tricky part, and what I think separates really great founders in pitching from just average founders is to be able to figure out what type of question they're asking and to listen to that and to respond accordingly. And I made it easy for you. I'll tell you what they are. There's four of them, and they all start with C. So it's the four C's. And I'm going to give them to you in ascending order of desirability. So this first one is not the kind of question you want to ask. So the first C is a confusion question. That's when they say, after your little pitch, they say, wait, what do you do? Oh, God. Or you just see that blank look in their eyes. Or they start asking you questions, and it's clear from the questions that they had no idea. The thing they're asking about is not the thing you do, right? Honestly, I don't mean to be harsh, but that is inexcusable. You have one job here. It's to, at the very beginning, just make sure they understand what you do. And if you don't do that, it's a complete fail. You can have the rest of the meeting, but it's not going to go well. I can almost guarantee. And you should go back, take a minute, cry in your coffee, dust yourself off, and write a better 30-second pitch and memorize it and try it out on people. Okay. The second type of question, which is just fine, is a clarification question. A second C, clarification. And that's where they get what you do. They're not confused, but they do want to know more about certain things that they're going to need to be able to frame the opportunity. For example, you mentioned B2C, but are you really B2B, or are you B2B2C? So you might clarify that for them. Are you selling direct to companies, your enterprise SaaS solution, or are you going to go through channels? Something like that. When you mention the market size, are you thinking about this serviceable addressable market or total addressable market? Those are okay. They're fine. They're a natural part of the conversation. They're not the meat of the conversation, but you got to get through them. And I'll talk to you about some tricks about how to get through those. The third is the challenge question. We've all had those. That's where either they know about something as well as you do. Maybe they're a subject matter expert, and you've put a fact out there, and they're like, "No, I don't quite buy that. I know because I invested in another company, and that's not the way this works." Or it could be that they don't know about it, and it just doesn't sound right to them. Do you mean to tell me that there are, the market for whatever the cans is worth $10 trillion? They just don't believe it. In which case, you got to back it up or clarify it or back off of it. So that's a challenge question. And that's a pattern recognition you can just see over time. Are there things in your pitch that just aren't resonating with people, and you got to work on those? But to get optimistic now, the fourth C, this is the really good one. This is the gold standard, what you really want. It's the curiosity question. This is where they are into it. They buy your premise. You could see like they're getting excited, and they start asking questions about how this could even be a bigger, better opportunity. Wow, you're going D2C, you're going B2C. Is there a world where you could sell this as like an employee benefit to companies? Oh wow, you're doing this in the U.S., but I just got back from Canada, and it seems like you could be doing this globally. Is that something you've thought about? Even better is when they start using the word "we." Is this something we could do in Canada? Right? And that means they're already mentally placing themselves as part of your company. And that is so exciting. And the way to deal with that, even if it's a terrible idea they suggest, is just take the win, take the yes, and roll with it. Say, that's a great idea. Yeah, we've been thinking about that. That's probably a year 3 opportunity for us, but I'd love to go into more detail about that. Again, it may be a terrible idea, but being a terrible idea is a year 3 problem.